New York, October 1970. A Tuesday evening so cold the steam rising from the Manhattan sidewalk grates looked like the city was breathing. The kind of cold that arrives in New York before anyone is ready for it, cutting through jackets and opinions with equal indifference. On West 48th Street, 3 blocks from Madison Square Garden, there was a gym that didn't have a sign outside. It didn't need one. Everyone who needed to know about it already knew. Gleon's Annex, some people called it. Others just called it Webb's Place, after the man who owned it and ran it, and had for the past 11 years made it the most respected private boxing facility in the city. The building was 4 stories of pre-war brick that smelled like every serious gym smells. Sweat and leather and ambition, and the particular sharp chemical smell of liniment applied to muscles that have been pushed past the point of comfort into the territory where champions are either made or broken. The ring was center floor, everything else arranged around it like planets around a sun. Heavy bags hanging in 2 rows, speed bags along the east wall, a weight area in the back that serious men used seriously, mirrors on the north wall, floor to ceiling, that showed you exactly what you looked like and never lied about it. The fluorescent lights overhead were the old kind, the kind that hummed slightly and made everything look exactly as real as it was. No flattery, no atmosphere, just light and work and whatever you were actually made of when everything else was stripped away. On this particular Tuesday evening, 8 professional fighters were using the gym. 2 were sparring in the ring, 3 were working bags, 2 were on weights, 1 was skipping rope in the corner with the mechanical rhythm of a man who has done this 10,000 times and will do it 10,000 more. Their trainer, a compact Italian-American named S, who had been in boxing since before most of them were born, sat on a stool at ringside with a stopwatch and the expression of a man who has seen everything and is therefore surprised by nothing. Outside, the wind moved through the gap between the buildings on West 48th Street with the particular efficiency of New York wind, which has been navigating the same corridors for 100 years and has learned every shortcut. The city was doing what the city does on Tuesday evenings in October, moving, consuming, producing the 10,000 simultaneous dramas of 8 million people, each convinced that their particular drama is the one that matters. Inside the gym, none of that existed. Inside the gym, there was only the work. At 7:15, the gym door opened and Bruce Lee walked in. He had been invited by Danny Kwan, a Hong Kong-born promoter who had connections in both the entertainment world and the boxing world, and who had been trying for 3 months to arrange a meeting between Bruce Lee and Marcus Webb, for reasons that were partly professional and partly the particular human impulse that makes people want to put 2 extraordinary things in the same room and see what happens. The meeting had been described to Bruce as a training observation. Come see how serious boxing works. Maybe demonstrate some techniques. Good for everyone. Bruce had agreed not because he needed to see anything or demonstrate anything, but because he was in New York for 2 days and he trained every day regardless of where he was or what else was happening. The gym was a gym. He would use it. He arrived alone. Dark training clothes, the simple, practical clothing of someone who came to work and had no interest in appearances. A small bag over one shoulder, he signed in at the front desk, exchanged brief words with the young man behind the counter, who clearly had no idea who he was, and made his way to an open area along the west wall, where there was enough space to work. He set his bag down. He began to warm up. What followed for the next 20 minutes was, to anyone watching with informed eyes, one of the most efficient and precise warm-up routines they had ever seen. Wing Chun forms first, the center line theory made visible in every movement, each gesture economical and purposeful and completely without waste. Then Jeet Kune Do footwork, the modified fencing stance, The constant, subtle shifting of weight that made him simultaneously impossible to read and impossible to hit. Then combinations, hands and feet moving in sequences that looked nothing like boxing and nothing like the martial arts most people in that gym had seen in movies, which was the only reference most of them had. It looked to the untrained eye like something between a dance and a ritual, precise, contained, foreign. The fighters began to notice. One by one, the men working bags slowed their work. The rope skipper rhythm broke. The sparring in the ring continued, but both fighters were stealing glances toward the west wall. S on his stool watched with the focused attention of a man who processes physical movement for a living and is encountering something that doesn't fit his existing categories. He had been in boxing for 30 years. He had trained world champions. He had seen every style that serious fighters bring to a serious gym. What he was watching did not belong to any of those categories. And the fact of that, the simple fact of encountering something genuinely new at the age of 54, held his complete attention in a way that very few things still could. Marcus Webb arrived at 7:40. He arrived the way he always arrived, which was the way a weather system arrives, announcing itself before it was fully present. The door opened and the room pressure changed. Marcus Webb was 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 418 pounds of pure functional muscle, the kind built not in front of mirrors, but in rings, in gyms, and the specific crucible of professional fighting over 17 years. He was 31 years old and had been fighting since he was 14 in the gyms of the Bronx, working his way up through amateur circuits and semi-professional bouts, and finally into the serious professional world, where he had established himself as, depending on who you asked, either the most dangerous sparring partner in New York or the most dangerous man, period. His record in official bouts was 28-0. His record in unofficial bouts, the kind that happened in gyms and warehouses, and occasionally parking lots, was a number nobody had bothered to count because the outcomes were never in question. He was Muhammad Ali's preferred heavy sparring partner during the period when Ali was preparing for the most important fights of his career. Ali had said publicly in an interview that had made the rounds in boxing circles that sparring with Marcus Webb was the closest thing to real danger he encountered in training. That statement meant something. It meant Marcus Webb was not a man whose physical reality was easily exaggerated. He walked into the gym in a gray tracksuit that was tight across the shoulders in a way that suggested the tracksuit had been bought before he had fully finished becoming what he was. He had a face that looked like it had been hit many times by very good fighters and had survived all of them without particular difficulty. His hands, even relaxed at his sides, looked like implements rather than appendages. He saw his fighters. He saw S. He saw the ring. He saw everything he expected to see. Then he saw the man on the west wall doing something that didn't look like boxing. He stopped walking. For a moment, he simply stood in the center of the gym and watched. The fighters who had been watching Bruce Lee now watched Marcus watching Bruce Lee. It was the particular silence of people waiting to find out what the most important person in the room thinks about something before deciding what they think about it themselves. He watched for approximately 30 seconds. During those 30 seconds, his expression moved through several stations: curiosity, assessment, amusement. The particular amusement of a man who is very large and very powerful, watching someone much smaller do something that from his perspective looked like a very elaborate way of accomplishing nothing practical. He walked toward the west wall. His fighters, tracking his movement, collectively stopped what they were doing. S sat down his stopwatch. The gym, which had been full of the noise of serious training, went quiet in the particular way gyms go quiet when something is about to happen that everyone can feel coming, but nobody can fully predict. Marcus stopped 10 feet from Bruce Lee and watched him finish a combination. Bruce Lee completed the combination, paused, became still, and turned to look at the large man who had materialized in his peripheral vision. They looked at each other for a moment, two men in a gym. The difference in their physical scale was immediate and concrete. Marcus spoke first. "What is that?" he said. Not hostile, genuinely curious, the way a craftsman is curious about a process he doesn't recognize. "Wing Chun," Bruce said. "Jeet Kune Do." Marcus nodded slowly, processing the words without recognition. "That's the kung fu thing," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yes," Bruce said. Marcus looked at the fighters behind him. Some of them were trying not to smile. He looked back at Bruce. "I've seen kung fu in movies," he said. "Looks good in movies." He paused. The pause did a specific kind of work. "Real different story when someone's actually trying to hit you." Bruce said nothing. He had heard this before. He would hear it again. He waited. "What are you, 140? Marcus said, looking Bruce up and down with the professional assessment of a man who had spent his adult life categorizing people by their physical potential to cause him harm. 145, Bruce said. Marcus made a sound that was not quite a laugh. 145, he repeated, as if the number itself was the punchline. He looked at his fighters again. This time some of them did smile. "Come here," Marcus said. "Let me show you what real fighting looks like. You've been doing those pretty movements over here, and I appreciate it. I do. It looks like it took a long time to learn, but there's a difference between what looks like fighting and what actually works when someone who can actually fight is standing in front of you." Bruce still said nothing. He was watching Marcus Webb the way he watched everything, completely cataloging weight distribution and muscle tension, and the small unconscious tells that the body produces when it is about to do something it has done many times before. Marcus stepped closer. He was close enough now that the size difference was no longer abstract. It was immediate and concrete and physical in the way that only proximity makes things physical. He looked down at Bruce Lee from a height advantage that had decided most of the situations Marcus had found himself in over the past 17 years. "Those little hands," Marcus said. He reached out and picked up Bruce Lee's right hand with 2 fingers, the way you might pick up something small and fragile to examine it. He turned it over. He showed it to the fighters behind him. Several of them laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was the laugh of people who found the contrast genuinely funny. 145 pounds of martial artist and 418 pounds of professional fighter, and the professional fighter was holding the martial artist's hand up for inspection like a curiosity. "You hit like a child," Marcus said. He said it conversationally, without particular malice. "The way you state a fact. These little hands, this little body, you think you can do something to me with this?" He released the hand. He took a step back. He spread his arms wide, a gesture that encompassed his entire body, an invitation. "Go ahead," he said. "Hit me anywhere you want, as hard as you can." He looked at his fighters. "Let's see if I feel it." The gym was completely silent. 8 professional fighters, 1 trainer, Danny Kwan near the door looking nervous, all of them watching the 145-pound man in dark training clothes standing in front of the 418-pound man with his arms spread wide in open invitation. Bruce Lee looked at Marcus Webb for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet. The gym was quiet enough that everyone heard it clearly. "I'll put you on the floor," Bruce Lee said, "with one combination." "Don't do this." It was not a boast. It had the quality of a man reading information from a surface and reporting accurately what he sees. A warning delivered without drama, the way you warn someone about a step they haven't noticed. Marcus stared at him. Then he laughed. It was a genuine laugh, surprised out of him by the audacity of the statement. He looked at his fighters. They were laughing too, most of them. One combination, Marcus repeated. He shook his head. Brother, I have sparred with Muhammad Ali. I have been hit by the best heavyweight hands in the world. You are 145 pounds. He spread his arms again, wider this time. Go ahead, show me what one combination looks like. Bruce Lee was still for one complete second. The stillness of someone who has made a decision and is moving from the decision into the execution without the hesitation that separates most people from what they intend to do. Then he moved. What happened in the next 2 seconds would be described differently by every person in that gym. The trainer, who had the most educated eye in the room, would later say that he saw the first movement clearly. A right hand that traveled approximately 8 inches and arrived at Marcus Webb's solar plexus with a sound that was wrong, that was different from the sound of normal punching, that had a quality of focused compression that he had never heard outside of a very specific kind of impact. The fighters closer to the action would say they saw the punch, but did not see it land. That the gap between the fist moving and Marcus Webb's face changing was too small to contain the motion they expected to see. The fighters farther back would say they saw nothing. That one moment the two men were standing facing each other, and the next moment the situation was different in a way that required explanation. What everyone agreed on was the sound. The first sound, the impact at the solar plexus, compact and final. And then, before Marcus Webb had fully processed that first impact, the second movement. A spinning back kick, delivered with the rotational force of a body that had been training its entire life to generate exactly this kind of power, connecting with Marcus Webb's left side at the floating rib, with a sound that was larger and more final than the first. Marcus Webb, 418 pounds, 17 years of professional fighting, Muhammad Ali's sparring partner, went down. He did not go down the way fighters go down when they have been hit hard and are choosing the canvas as a tactical decision. He went down the way structures go down when something fundamental has been removed from their foundation. He went straight. He went fast. 418 pounds of human being hit the floor of the gym on West 48th Street, and the sound it made was felt in the chest before it was heard with the ears. The heavy bags swayed slightly from the vibration. Then silence. Complete, total, absolute silence in which the only sound was the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the distant noise of Manhattan traffic that had been there all along, but that nobody had been aware of until this moment when there was nothing else. Bruce Lee stood where he had been standing when he threw the kick. He had not moved from that position. His right hand had returned to his side. His breathing was unchanged. His expression was unchanged. He looked at Marcus Webb on the floor with the same expression he had worn through the entire exchange. Neutral. Complete. The expression of someone for whom what just happened was not a surprise, but an inevitability that he had tried to prevent and had been unable to prevent, and had therefore executed with the full commitment that inevitability demands. The 8 fighters stood exactly where they had been standing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Had the stopwatch in his hand and had forgotten he was holding it. Danny Kwan at the door had both hands pressed flat against the wall behind him, as if he needed the support. One of the fighters near the heavy bags, a middleweight from Queens named Ray, who had been training at Webb's gym for 3 years and had never seen Marcus Webb on the floor in any context for any reason, later said that his first thought was not about Bruce Lee at all. His first thought was that something had broken in the building, that a beam had given way, or a pipe had burst, or some structural failure had occurred that explained why the largest man he knew was suddenly on the floor. It took him several seconds to understand that the building was fine, that the only thing that had changed was the information Marcus Webb was now in possession of. Marcus Webb lay on the floor for 7 seconds. 7 seconds in which the gym remained completely silent and nobody moved toward him, and nobody moved away from him. Then he moved slowly, with the deliberate care of a man who is taking inventory of his body before asking it to perform. His right hand found the floor, then his left. He pushed himself to a sitting position. He sat for another 3 seconds, breathing, eyes on the floor in front of him. Then he looked up. He looked at Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was looking back at him. The same expression, neutral, complete, waiting without impatience for whatever came next. Around them, the gym remained silent. The 8 fighters had not moved. Nobody seemed to know what the protocol was for what had just happened because there was no protocol. Because this had not happened before. Not in this gym. Not to this man. Not like this. Marcus Webb put one foot on the floor, then the other. He stood up. It took effort. The effort was visible, and the visibility of it in a man that size, in front of men who trained with him every day, was itself a kind of statement. He stood. He straightened. He was breathing carefully. The breath of a man managing specific pain in a specific location. But he was standing, and his eyes were clear, and his face had moved through the shock into something else. Something that was still processing, still computing what the data meant. He looked at Bruce Lee for a long time. The gym watched him look. Marcus Webb had never in his professional life walked toward a man who had just put him on the floor. He did it now. His fighters instinctively shifted, not blocking, not intervening, just repositioning the way people reposition when they are uncertain about the direction of events. Marcus stopped 2 feet from Bruce Lee. He was still taller and heavier, and none of that information meant what it had meant 8 seconds ago. "I owe you an apology," Marcus Webb said. His voice was different from the voice he had used before. The performance was gone from it. What remained was something simpler and more honest. The voice of a man speaking without the armor of certainty that had been his constant companion for 17 years. "I was disrespectful," he said. "What I said to you was disrespectful, and what I did with your hand was disrespectful, and you warned me, and I didn't listen." He paused. He was still breathing carefully. "I'm sorry." The gym was silent. Bruce Lee looked at him for a moment, then he nodded once. A small nod. Acknowledgement without theater. The nod of a man who has accepted what was offered and considers the matter addressed. "It's done," Bruce Lee said. Marcus Webb nodded. He turned. He walked toward the locker room at the back of the gym. His fighters parted to let him through. None of them said anything. The locker room door opened and closed, and he was gone. The gym remained silent for several seconds after the door closed. Then Shows the trainer cleared his throat. The sound of it broke something, and the gym began to breathe again slowly, the way a room breathes after something has happened in it that will take time to fully understand. The fighters looked at each other, and then looked at Bruce Lee, and then looked at each other again. Bruce Lee picked up his bag from the west wall. He checked that everything was in order. He put the bag over his shoulder. He walked to the front desk and signed out. He pushed through the door and walked out onto West 48th Street, where the steam was still rising from the grates, and the cold was still doing what cold does in New York in October, finding every gap and filling it. He walked 2 blocks to a payphone and called his hotel and asked them to hold his dinner reservation. Then he put the receiver down and stood for a moment in the cold, with his bag over his shoulder and the sounds of Manhattan around him. The city moved around him the way cities move around people who have just done something significant and chosen not to announce it. Marcus Webb, back in the gym, sat alone in the locker room for 20 minutes before anyone came to check on him. When his trainer finally came in, he found Webb sitting on the bench with his hands on his knees, looking at the floor. The trainer asked if he was hurt. Marcus said no. The trainer asked what had happened. Marcus thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "I found out what I didn't know I didn't know. The trainer didn't fully understand that. Marcus didn't explain further. He showered, he dressed, he went home. He didn't train the next day, which was the first day in 11 years he had missed without injury as the reason. He spent the day thinking about 8 inches of travel in 2 seconds, and what they meant about everything he had understood fighting to be. Danny Kwan tried to reach Bruce Lee the following morning to apologize for how the evening had gone. Bruce Lee told him there was nothing to apologize for, that the evening had gone exactly as evenings go when two people are honest about what they know and don't know. Danny asked if he would come back to the gym. Bruce said he had a flight to catch. He caught it. Marcus Webb fought twice more professionally, winning both bouts. But people who knew him said something had changed. Not in his ability, in his certainty. The absolute, unquestioned certainty that had been the foundation of everything he did had developed a crack. A single crack placed there by 8 inches of travel and a spinning back kick on a Tuesday evening in October. Some cracks once made never fully close. They just become part of the structure, part of what holds everything together differently than it was held together before. The trainer never talked about that Tuesday evening publicly, but for the rest of his career, whenever a young fighter came into his gym and dismissed someone based on size, S would stop the session. He would sit the fighter down. He would ask one question. He would ask if the fighter had ever been genuinely surprised. Not surprised by a good punch from someone he knew could punch. Genuinely surprised. The way you are surprised when the world turns out to be organized differently than you believed. Most young fighters said no. S would nod. He would say, "Keep training. One day you'll understand what I mean." He never explained further. He didn't need to. Ray, the middleweight from Queens who had been the first to think the building had broken, fought for 12 more years after that Tuesday evening. He won a regional title in 1973. He retired in 1982 with a record he was proud of. At his retirement dinner, when people asked him what the most significant moment of his career was, he didn't mention any of his fights. He mentioned a Tuesday evening in October 1970 when he watched a 145-pound man do something to a 418-pound man that he still, 12 years later, could not fully explain in terms that satisfied him. He said it had made him a better fighter, not because of the technique, but because of what it taught him about the difference between what you think you know and what you actually know. Those two things, he said, are never as close together as you believe they are. The work of a fighter, the real work, is closing that gap.